Merci. Aubert Michaud with the IRDA, IRDA. Around here, we lose a lot of nitrates. Well, on those subsurface drains, we get about 80% of our water yield going down those drains. We did monitor up to 60 kilos hand per hectare weight average on watershed. So there's a lot of it. And of course, we could probably do a lot of it, well, somehow source control. But there's a lot when you get at 300 millimeters of rain going down that drain, okay, between the time we get into the field on that 4-leaf stage. So I haven't heard about maybe controlled drainage. Is there any perspective, you know? We can control maybe the inputs, but is there any way we could reduce through controlled drainage, work at the outputs?
It's yours.
So the question was how we can control drainage in terms of whether we can reduce drainage or plug in or increase in some cases. There are some technologies, and in Iowa, some farmers started installing so-called controlled drainage structure. There is a company in Iowa, actually, it's a company in Iowa which produced this controlled drainage structure. Essentially, you would have to identify your tiles. You have to dig up a big hole, a pit, and you can plug in the drainage in some case. The problem in your case, the problem in your case in Iowa that we have to start planting season as soon as possible, right? Because it's very critical, especially in your area when soils are cold and you don't have a big window for either applying fertilizer or actually planting in your case. So it will work probably better in the second half of this season. But the cost of this structure, I don't remember, a couple $1,000. And in fact, they also use them with so-called bioreactors. That's what Dr. Schepers described. These things are much bigger, maybe as a 1/4 of this room. They would put wood chips, and they would direct this water early in the season, which has potentially high nitrate for different reasons, is either reduced residual nitrate from the last year or some nitrate accumulated during this short season. And this water can go through these wood chips, and theoretically it should go up to the air. But as Dr. Schepers mentioned, there is some percentage that goes as a nitrous oxide too. So that's one potential, and there are some technology to do it. I'm not sure whether it's been used or tried here in your part of the Canada or not.
I hesitate a little bit because I haven't fully summarized the data, but I know in southwestern Ontario, Chintan has done a lot of work with controlled drainage shrub irrigation. I think it works best if the farm can identify an area for a reservoir to store the water, because the difficulty is, you know, in Quebec and Ontario, we enter the spring with generally our soil columns saturated, and if we want to do something about reducing runoff, absorbing more of the water in the soil and keeping the nutrients there, we have to have a place for this water and perhaps recirculate it back. And there are sometimes contrasting effects on the nitrate versus the phosphate, some potential to solubilize some more phosphate as well in the water, but at the same time, if you can prevent its runoff and allow it to be resorbed into the crops with just the controlled drainage, or if you use sub-irrigation and take the water and put it back on the crops, then you can increase crop productivity. So it has potential for the flat land, yeah.
I was only going to say that it seems to me that the paramount issue is getting the soil drained so the soil can warm up so you can plant. And that's got to be the most important. And after that, what are we going to do with the water? And does it have nitrate or phosphorus in it that is going to somehow be detrimental to the environment? Or can we use it somehow?
Yes, I have two questions, but I will start with the first one because you may comment on the panel may comment on this. About the nitrate leaching. Nitrate is an anion, so in nature, anions and cations go together. So I suppose that when nitrates get leached, something cationic must leach with it. So do you have some idea if you increase the rate of nitrogen, you may increase the rate of leaching of some cations too? So are you aware of some studies about it? Did you have some ideas? If you increase nitrogen, do you increase, for example, potassium leaching?
Tom?
I don't have any. I don't believe I've seen a specific study on that question, which is a relevant question, because obviously something accompanies the nitrate ions that go out. But it is, to some degree, a question of relative amounts as well. We are concerned when nitrate reaches 10 parts per million of nitrate N. And the accompanying amount of calcium, magnesium, or potassium that would go along with that is going to be on the same order of magnitude, which is only a few pounds per acre. In terms of calcium, you lose that from most of our Ontario soils where we have a high pH and high calcium. Possibly not much of an issue. If we have a very sandy soil with very high levels of potassium, yes, we may increase to some degree some potassium losses. And it's probably a part of the concern. I think, though, that the largest part of the concern could be quantified in terms of simple economic loss of nitrogen. Aubert says 60 kilograms per hectare nitrogen loss. That's a direct economic loss to the farmer. Add on the potassium that goes with it, maybe we add maybe $6 more. I'm just taking a wild guess. But it's going to be, it's an additional cost, but it's probably small in comparison to the nitrogen itself that is being lost.
Well, we just observed that when you in potato field, when we increase the rate of nitrogen, we increase the rate of potassium leaching. This is,
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
so, but we have to quantify that more precisely.
Okay.
I have a second question about the concept of soil series integrated into the the analysis of crop response to fertilizers. Is it useful in the U.S. Using the soil series concept to help increasing the accuracy of the fertilizer recommendation?
So I want to repeat the question. The question is whether integrated soil map, digital soil map units or soil types into fertilizer recommendation will help. That's a very intuitive question because all of this information is free. It's available, and you can program your applicator and apply fertilizer based on these digital soil maps. In fact, it's common done in Iowa for P, K, and also for lime. Like in central Iowa, it has the same same type of glacial till as here, but it's calcareous. It has a lot of high lime concentration. So if you use these soil maps, you can apply lime in variable rates. In terms of nitrogen, we don't see very good, at least what we have done in the past. It's very difficult to use soil maps even explain some of the variability in yield response. We can explain variability in yields, but when it comes to yield response, it's very difficult at this point.
There was an earlier question about yield response using slow release type fertilizers and maybe even nitrification inhibitors, these kind of things. And I go back to some of the earlier work where people said, oh, we found a response to a nitrification inhibitor or these particular types of fertilizers. But we have to keep in mind that those things are designed to work when you don't have an excess of nutrient, nitrogen, in the soil. So if you've overloaded the system already with nitrogen and you put a nitrification inhibitor on, hey, maybe you shouldn't expect a response.
Une autre question? Okay.
I have a question about the end sensor. We talk a lot about corn this morning, but there is other crop like potato crop, and I not personally my observation using those end sensor crop doesn't work pretty well with the potato. Do you have any thought why it doesn't work as well as it worked with corn?
Does potato produce this luxury consumption patterns that was as you increase? Okay.
Yes.
I can only give some conjecture as well, but I know having worked with potato growers, sometimes corn growers are concerned with they have a 5% yield loss. Potato growers are often concerned if they have 0.5% yield loss, is one aspect of the question. And then varieties have different responses to nitrogen as well. Some varieties are sensitive to excess nitrogen, and some require very high amounts. So I would propose, I guess, that if you wanted to begin sensor work with potatoes, begin with the ones that are sensitive to excess nitrogen, and the possibility would exist that it would work. It's also a very short season, fast growing crop, so that's another challenge for sensors, I would suppose. Jim may have a rebuttal here, but
Remember, these sensors are looking at chlorophyll, and so in the case of potatoes with luxury consumption, they may not be picking up differences in chlorophyll, but if there's disease or other kinds of problems sneaking in, they might be an early warning signal, like they were in the turf grass that I showed you here. That in that case, we could see the problems 2 to 3 weeks before the visible eye, or our eyes, my eye, could see that.
If I could comment a bit on this also, there's another fact that we measure chlorophyll, and in fact what we harvest is tuber. So I think that's also a part of the answer why it's getting not so good with this. So yeah.
D'autres questions? Vous avez qu'à lever la main.
If not, I may have one about the fact, as you said, Jim, that we live in different world. You're in Nebraska, we are here in Quebec, and we have a shorter season than you have. So our window of opportunity for applying side dressing is shorter. We don't have high clearance tractors, we don't have irrigation, stuff like that. So we have to work on something like a V3 to V6 basis, and V6 is getting late. So do you think that if we detect a deficiency at a so early stage, really the corn will be able to recover and bring the yield up to the level it could have been without deficiency at the beginning?
The producers in Nebraska are no different than here. I think that they don't want to have to buy any high clearance sprayers and this sort of thing. If they don't have to, they'd like to use their conventional equipment. And so we started monitoring the crop when there was about 3 leaf stage, and every leaf stage on up to see what's the reliability. Well, as you can imagine, in our case, yours too, that early season growth is somewhat affected by soil temperature, or maybe a lot, and water content and those kind of things. So the reliability of that early season sensor reading is probably more important in terms of the spatial variability in the field, and not necessarily telling you about how much to apply. As the time goes on, it becomes more and more reliable. But the other point about corn, and as I understand it here, you don't want to stress a corn plant before or at least during the 5 to 7 leaf stage. That's when it determines the number of rows of kernels and yield potential. So if you've lost the number of rows of kernels, even a light stress during that period will reduce the number of rows of kernels. You stress it then, you're never going to get it back. And so that's why the strategy of some amount of pre-plant nitrogen for corn, just to get you past that point. And so it's a management concept strategy type thing. And the second stress is around soaking time. You want to have a healthy plant going into the pollination fertilization period so that you don't have any kernel abortion. And that's why they say if you're going to fertigate or put nitrogen on later in the season, put it on a week or 10 days before soaking, just to give it a bit of a steroid, a bit of a boost. And it may not be, it's cheap insurance is what it comes down to.
So my question is related to P and soil test P. In fact, we saw one graph at least with soil test P, Bry 1 and the crop response, right? Since maybe 6 years now, we have some different trials in Quebec and outside. And based in soil test, we should have a response. However, in most crops, we have wheat, corn, canola, grassland. We don't have any response. Even the soil test B that we use it, Milik-free or Olsen or in fact, we use it for soil test, and the response is negative. So how can you explain or?
I need a little more explanation of your question. You say over the past 6 years you have done response trials on this list of crops, and there's a number of them that are not responding. To what level, to how low is the level of Milik-3 soil test phosphorus where you are extending this range to?
It is low based in the local recommendation for each crop.
So what you're saying is that some of these soils are testing in the area where you are recommending phosphorus, and you have 6 years of consistent no response.
For 4 years. Yeah, even for some crops, we have 6 years or more.
Some crops you have 6 years and no response. Yeah. We know soil tests, number one, aren't perfect. Number two, they're at their best, they're usually an index of probability of response. We have in any soil test calibration for phosphorus or potassium, you will have some very low testing soils, no response. But if the soil test is working, for the majority of cases, there should be a response if it is called low or pauvre in soil test phosphorus. What are the reasons for lack of response? You have to consider whether you are working with high yield production practices. You have to consider whether you are working with attaining yields that are equivalent to what producers are attaining, planting in the similar conditions of growers. There are many other factors that can affect the response of crop to phosphorus or to potassium. And if water is adequate, but those kind of reasons can exist in some conditions. Yeah.
Phosphorus placement too also will impact soil test performance.
The other thing to think about is if you see no response and you expect one, it may be a good time to take some tissue samples and take a look at them for possible interactions, because zinc is known to interact with phosphorus in a negative way. Manganese, some of these other elements, who knows, I guess. It's a place to start looking.
Il y aurait peut-être une dernière question de Léon rapidement. Ensuite, on va conclure.
Sometimes we can observe a reverse situation. In many soils, we have high MELEC3 levels and yet a high response to P fertilization. My hypothesis is that as soil quality gets lower due to compaction, for example, high P levels may be present, but the crop may still respond to P inputs. I would like to know if you have an idea on that. High P level soil tests may result in a strong crop response to P fertilization.
Well, the first, very casual observation is you must be working with potatoes, but but you mean other crops as well. I know with potatoes, I have not seen a soil test level at which the potato crop stops responding. That's sort of in general. Your other point about yes, compaction could cause an increase in response to phosphorus or to potassium, and those factors do need to be considered as well. And the overall soil quality could be a part of this. I'm not sure if there is definitive proof there, because I really can't say too much more about that.
Isn't it a risk that relying solely on soil tests would lead to the wrong agronomic recommendation?
Right, yeah. Your point being you don't simply want to use phosphorus to correct soil compaction. Yeah.
So, Leon, don't worry. We have a new government, and soil quality will not be a problem anymore. Everything will be fine.
Well, one potential thing that it could be helpful in Iowa, we also use a subsoil test. It's not a real subsoil test, but there are some adjustments for subsoil P. And I'm thinking that your soil kind of have a same origin as our in terms of glacial stuff. It's very mixed and complex stuff. And traditional soil testing is based on 6 inches. I would say maybe you can look at the subsoil P and see whether it can help you to explain some of these responses or no response potentially.
Just brief comment on that. Was some years ago, we did some soil testing on those subsoil P for most of soil series in Quebec. It was to back up a P index for water quality, but it did succeed in explaining that particular P bioavailability we were observing in water. So, but have some rebound for soil maybe.
Okay, that sense.
Okay, I think that'll be all for now. Merci beaucoup pour votre participation. Je voudrais qu'on remercie encore les conférenciers pour leur excellent travail. On est très, très contents du résultat. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Je peux vous dire que les présentations PowerPoint des 3 conférenciers vont être déposées sur le site du CRAAQ, à la section Commission des sols et la section de la Commission géomatique et d'agriculture de précision. Puis vous allez recevoir un courriel aussi pour vous aviser du lien, de l'hyperlien pour accéder à ça. Et on est à l'étape des remerciements et ils sont vraiment sincères parce que, vous savez, c'est bon d'avoir des idées et de la volonté de faire des choses, mais si le financement n'est pas au rendez-vous, ben on arrête assez vite de discuter. Alors, le MAPAQ a fait sa part pour financer cette activité-là. Alors, c'est très apprécié. C'est comme la divine providence, là. Il y a une contribution d'un généreux partenaire dont, en la personne morale du MAPAQ. Alors, c'est vraiment très apprécié. Et je voudrais aussi, personnellement, et je suis sûr qu'Atina se joint à moi pour remercier particulièrement Joanne Lagacé du CRAAQ, le CRAAQ en général, mais Joanne qui a travaillé très fort à l'organisation de l'événement. Ça a été un plaisir de travailler dans ce contexte-là où chacun fait ce qu'il a à faire et Atina, dans le trio qu'on constitue, on a bien travaillé, on est content de la réponse qu'on a obtenue aussi. Que vous soyez là, c'est la récompense pour nous. Et puis, on espère que vous avez apprécié et qu'on espère pouvoir répéter ce genre d'activité-là dans l'avenir. Je voudrais aussi remercier l'INRS, à la personne de Karem Chokmani, qui nous a accueillis ici dans ce bel établissement et qui a offert ça gracieusement pour vous accueillir. C'est très apprécié. Alors, merci à l'INRS et à Karem.